Governor of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, confirmed today that in his judgment, the biggest risk to the British economy is the failure to solve the Eurozone crisis. Publicly, all the major players, the so-called Troika of the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund and the European Union, they all agree that Greece needs an enormous second bailout. But behind the scenes tonight, there are huge cracks. The German finance minister referred to Greece as a bottomless pit. A finance minister's meeting today was postponed, apparently because the paperwork was not in order. And the Greek president, clearly angry, said he could not accept insults to his country from Germany or the Netherlands or Finland. Joe Lynam reports on the mess that no one seems able to clear up.
Europe is experiencing one of the most severe cold snaps in decades, minus 30 degrees in many places. That Europe is cold in the winter is not unusual. That it should be freezing in the Mediterranean is very irregular. And that meteorological chill from north to south seems to have been replicated in this endless Eurozone crisis, with Germany, Finland and others hinting strongly that Greece's days in the single currency may be numbered. And they're getting the hint in Athens, where the finance minister Evangelos Venizelos told his countrymen today that there were several Eurozone nations who no longer wanted Greece as a member.
There are visible powers internally in Europe that are playing with fire because they believe the October the 26th European Council agreement might not be implemented and the specifications will not be kept to, and who possibly may want Greece out of the Eurozone.
And it's not just northern politicians actively considering a Greek exit. Even German corporate royalty, the chief executive of Bosch, Franz Fehrenbachm, seen here drinking with Angela Merkel, today demanded that Greece not only leave the euro, but the EU.
Now the mood of the business actually is more and more very, if not even hostile toward Greece, because they realise this is going to be very, very difficult financially, economically, and there are more and more people on the business side who are not too sure this is going to last, this will be possible to go on.
2 years ago, when the Greek crisis first erupted, the mood in Germany was one of solidarity with their more profligate southern cousins. But 2 bailouts and multiple promises broken later, the mood has changed somewhat. That means that German politicians, buoyed with popular support back home, can play very hard ball with Athens, the kind of hard ball that could push Greece over the edge. And today, MEPs in the Tory-dominated European Conservatives and Reformists group urge the EU to get on with booting the Greeks out of the Eurozone.
It's no surprise that Germans are unhappy about keeping Greece in the euro, because they're being asked to bail out, as they see it, governments that have been much more profligate than theirs. But I think it's a mistake to see Greece leaving the euro as some sort of punishment. In fact, the main beneficiaries of Greece leaving the euro will be the Greek people, who can end this misery of permanent deflation and poverty and at least begin to claw their way back to some kind of export-led recovery. So Greece leaving the euro, as well as being a great relief to the people who would have otherwise had to bail them out, is of huge benefit to Greek people themselves, who can devalue, price their way back into the market and start to grow again.
So if he and many others get their way, how exactly would a Greek exit, or Grexit, work? Well, before Greece even hints at quitting the euro, it would have to impose strict capital controls so that all savings and current accounts would be effectively locked into Greek banks, which themselves would probably have to be fully nationalised. Then a parallel or electronic new currency would have to be created to transfer all debts and assets into a new drachma, which would eventually replace the euros in circulation. Then the ECB, and Germany in particular, would have to give a lot more than a gold carriage clock to Greece as a leaving present. And to prevent contagion, Berlin and Frankfurt would have to immediately introduce euro bonds to save the rest of the single currency from implosion. But is even planning for a Grexit dangerous?
I don't think anybody should hide behind the fingers. This kind of thinking has been going on for a while. There are contingency plans prepared all over the world, not just in Europe. And the Greek people are watching closely. And they are indeed very scared, because possible default, exit of the single currency, exit of the European Union will be catastrophic for Greece. And it will send the wrong signal about the process of European integration. It's important we keep the euro intact and we just do what is necessary to move forward and make it successful like it was in the first 10 years of its existence.
Take your money and get out. We don't want your
As diplomats at the Greek embassy here in London will no doubt know, there are two normal ways for an economy to restore its competitiveness after an economic shock. You can have an internal devaluation where you clamp down on wages and deflate the economy, or you can have an external devaluation whereby your currency is allowed to float downwards. That, of course, is out for Greece because it's a member of the Eurozone, which means it's putting all its eggs in the internal devaluation basket. The problem is the alternative to that is an outright default. With or without a messy default, Greece will be racked with a lot more of this type of street anger, because the leader of the largest opposition party and probable next Prime Minister signed a letter today promising to honour the austerity pledges when or if April's election goes ahead. There's little doubt now that Greece stands on a precipice with its European partners. Relations have never been as frosty. Anti-German sentiment is rampant, but so too is the feeling that Greece could be a few months away from being frozen out of the euro entirely.
Joe Lynam reporting there now. Our economics editor Paul Mason's just arrived back from Athens. What is the EU trying to do?
Well, I think the EU has always known that as soon as you give 130 billion euros to the Greek government and write off 100 billion worth of debt, the boot transfers from the foot of Mr Schäuble and the EU people to the Greek politicians, because they've then got closure, or an element of it. So what they've always up to now done is tried to design the bailout in such a way that there is strong surveillance, so you can say, keep doing what you're supposed to do. This was all based on the idea that it would be a stable coalition government, or a stable single-party government after an election. Once you realise that's not going to happen, things get wobbly. And what's clear from documents leaked to the Financial Times overnight was that at some point in the last 24 hours, they started to think, well, maybe what we do is just give them a bit of money. We give them a bit of the bailout, then make them have an election, make them have a government that signs up to doing it, and then keep the money here, ready to, as it were, give if they do the right thing and withhold. So there was almost a thought that a bailout could be designed to save the banks, to save Europe, but almost to say, take or leave, saving Greece.
So what, we've seen the trouble in the streets, obviously, Paul, but what are they actually worried about in terms of Greek politics in the month or two ahead?
Well, they're worried about the fact that the two main parties are now fragmenting. The PASOK is down to 8% in the polls. It was a government 6 months ago. That New Democracy has lost some MPs, and that its plans are really about, maybe they want innovative Conservative idea, flat tax, or they want to do massively more privatisation than already planned, 50 billion. And when you listen to them and you think, well, what's the... A, are you going to be able to do it? B, are you going to be able to form a majority? And the answer is pretty clearly no. You've got two choices. Once the elections start, these parties, they are big traditional parties, will be pulled towards their own base. It'll be very hard for them to form a coherent government. And I think the European Union just thought, look, if they can't form a coherent government to negotiate with after an election, well, Mr Schäuble said it today, they need a technocratic government. They need... Papademos, the Prime Minister, has been accused of being, he's at Goldman Sachs. A lot of the present politicians would not get an interview with Goldman Sachs. And that is what the European Union is worried about, the competence issue.
Paul, thank you.